The day Jessica Miller's world crumbled, she sat in her living room, engulfed in the icy silence of despair. Her daughters, twins Avery and Maddie, had vanished without a trace during a cruise, and 10 long, agonizing months had passed since. In the dim light of the Richmond room, surrounded by the remnants of an investigation that had yielded nothing but disappointment, Jessica felt broken. On the coffee table, like silent witnesses to the tragedy, lay flyers with her girls' smiling faces. Some photos were creased from constant handling. Others faded under the sunlight filtering through the lowered blinds. Police reports and documents detailing every day of their ill-fated cruise were piled on the table, becoming her obsessive focus. She reread them again and again, memorizing every detail, every missed clue. Beside the chair was a table with a stack of unopened sympathy cards. Jessica couldn't bring herself to open any of them. Acknowledging the condolences meant acknowledging what she desperately feared, that her girls would never return. She rubbed her eyes, feeling the exhaustion that permeated her bones. Today she was rereading the report of the 4th day of the cruise, when Avery and Maddie, who were only 8 years old, disappeared, leaving behind only emptiness. Her gaze drifted to the cards. Maybe today she would allow herself to feel what others had long accepted. Her fingers touched one of the envelopes when the phone rang. The screen displayed Detective Michael Davis's name. Jessica's heart pounded. She answered, her voice betraying the fragile hope that, despite everything, still flickered within her. "Detective, is there news?" She expected the usual, a dead end, unverifiable information, or simply a routine check-in. But Detective Davis's voice sounded different, tense, restrained, with a tone she had never heard before. "I just received information from the Oak Island Police Department, North Carolina." Jessica straightened in her chair, her breathing quickening. "What information?" An uneasy pause hung on the other end of the line. "I have to warn you." Davis's voice sounded somber. "What I'm about to say is going to be terrible. A local fisherman pulled up a suitcase. In it, remains. We believe they may belong to one of your daughters." The room seemed to swirl. Jessica gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. "What?" she gasped, her voice trembling. "I can't explain everything over the phone," Davis continued. "We're flying to North Carolina together. The suitcase also contains personal items that you will need to identify." Jessica jumped up, her legs barely holding her. "When?" "I'll pick you up in an hour. The evidence is at the forensic lab at the sheriff's department. There are remains. They're awaiting our arrival." Hanging up the phone, Jessica felt tears stream down her cheeks. She moved around the house mechanically, as if in a dream, packing a small bag. Memories of what happened 10 months ago flashed through her mind like movie frames. The cruise she had worked so hard for, to give her daughters an unforgettable vacation. She remembered that restaurant. They went there for a snack after swimming. It was quiet, around 3:30 in the afternoon, minimal staff. She excused herself for 5 minutes, only 5 minutes, to answer an important call outside where the signal was better. When she returned, they were gone. The restaurant staff had seen the girls leave but couldn't say where they had gone. The hours that followed turned into a nightmare of panic and disbelief. Jessica frantically searched every corner of the enormous ship. The cruise staff announced a shipwide alert, and a thorough search began. They combed the public areas, kids' clubs, pools, bathrooms. They conducted cabin-by-cabin checks of all rooms, including locked and unoccupied ones. Security cameras captured the girls watching a show by the pool, but when the crowd dispersed, they vanished. Despite hours spent reviewing security camera footage covering the entire ship, not a single new clue pointing to the girls' whereabouts was found. A day passed, but Avery and Maddie were still missing. Then, the flag state of the ship was notified. The U.S. Coast Guard and the FBI joined the investigation. Local port authorities and police in the ship's last port of call, as well as in future destinations, were immediately informed of the incident. A formal investigation began. A head count, a lockdown of the ship, and interrogations of all passengers with mandatory document checks. But despite all efforts, Avery and Maddie remained listed as missing. Whispers of fear spread throughout the ship. Some passengers speculated that the girls must have fallen overboard. Others, fraught with worry, speculated about an abduction during the ship's port call. The cruise line, maintaining a composed front, insisted on the robustness of their security protocols. But the fact remained. 2 8-year-old girls had vanished, seemingly into thin air. The hours stretched on with unbearable slowness, plunging Jessica into a fog of despair. A sudden knock on the door jolted her out of her stupor. Grabbing her overnight bag, she opened the door to find Detective Davis standing there. His face was a mask of grimness and composure. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. Jessica nodded, locking the door behind her. As they walked toward his nondescript police car, she braced herself for the inevitable. After 10 months of agonizing uncertainty, she was about to confront a mother's worst nightmare, or perhaps finally find the first real clue in her. Daughter's disappearance. The flight to North Carolina passed in a heavy silence. Jessica, glued to the window, watched as the landscape below transformed from urban sprawl to the coastal plains of the Outer Banks. Detective Davis, respecting her privacy, immersed himself in the case files on his tablet, glancing at her occasionally to ensure she was holding up. Upon arriving at the regional airport, they were met by a local officer and driven to the modest sheriff's precinct in a nearby suburb. The single-story brick building, set back from the road, was shrouded in the shade of tall pines, swaying in the coastal breeze. "The forensic evidence from Oak Island is here," Davis explained as they approached the entrance. "It's the closest facility equipped to handle this type of evidence." The air inside was frigid and reeked of disinfectant, the hum of fluorescent lights grating on the ears. A deputy led them down a hallway to a back room, the evidence storage area. "Before we go in," Davis stopped Jessica, his hand gently resting on her arm, a gesture of reassurance. "I want you to be prepared. What you're about to see will be difficult." Jessica nodded, her throat suddenly dry. They were given masks and sterile gowns. As they entered the room, Jessica noticed an older man, in his 50s, standing to the side, quietly talking to an officer. His hands were rough and calloused, his skin tanned by the sun. "Mrs. Miller," the sheriff addressed her, "this is Samuel Green, the fisherman who found the suitcase." The man stepped forward, his face etched with a mixture of sympathy and awkwardness. "I'm so sorry for your loss, ma'am," he said in a gravelly voice. "Wish I'd found something different that day." Jessica nodded her thanks, but her attention was already riveted to the center of the room. There, on a large stainless steel table, lay a suitcase. Medium-sized and boxy, it had clearly been through the ringer of the ocean. The once blue material had faded to a grayish hue, the seams warped and bulging from prolonged exposure to salt and sun. Next to it stood a medical examiner, awaiting their signal to proceed. "Mrs. Miller, we've documented everything as it was found," he explained. "I'll show you the contents now." Jessica braced herself, gripping the edge of the nearest counter as the examiner carefully lifted the lid of the suitcase. She gasped, tears instantly welling in her eyes. Inside lay the badly decomposed remains of a small child. 10 months in the ocean currents had reduced the body to a bloated, discolored, and partially skeletal state, but the child was wrapped in layers of clothing, some of which retained recognizable features. "Preliminary findings suggest the victim died of asphyxiation," the medical examiner stated dryly. "No signs of blunt force trauma, sharp force injuries, no blood." But Jessica barely heard him. Her gaze was fixed on a faded red t-shirt with a Minnie Mouse design, the very same shirt Maddie had been wearing on the cruise. Beneath the decaying remains, a pair of blue swim goggles was visible. On the side, barely discernible, was the letter M. "That's Maddie's shirt," Jessica whispered, her voice trembling. "And her goggles. I bought matching sets for both girls, but Maddie's had an M and Avery's had an A." The medical examiner nodded grimly. "We'll need your authorization to take a DNA sample for confirmation, although, based on your identification of the personal effects—" "Yes, of course," Jessica agreed mechanically. "But I don't need DNA to know that's my daughter." Detective Davis placed a supportive hand on her shoulder as the examiner continued, indicating a separate evidence bag. "There was something else found with the remains," he said. "An item that doesn't appear to belong to the child." Inside the clear bag lay a silver Zippo lighter, tarnished by seawater, but still intact. Engraved on its surface were the initials KR. "That doesn't belong to my daughters," Jessica confirmed, peering at the lighter through the plastic. "They were 8 years old. They wouldn't have something like that." "This is our first lead," Davis remarked, studying the lighter intently. "An anomaly that might help us identify the person who did this." Jessica turned to the fisherman. "Mr. Green, could you please describe how you found it?" The man shifted from foot to foot. "I was walking along the beach near my house, like I do every morning. I noticed something washed up that didn't look like regular trash. As I got closer, I smelled something. Well, it wasn't pleasant. I opened it just enough to see what was inside and called the police right away." "Was there anything else?" Jessica asked desperately. "Any sign of my other daughter?" Green shook his head. "Just the suitcase, ma'am. I'm very sorry." Jessica turned to Detective Davis. "Why would someone put Maddie in a suitcase and throw it in the ocean if they wanted to get rid of her?" Struggling to find the words, she blurted out, "Why not something that would sink?" "Good question," the sheriff interjected, his voice even, but his eyes filled with sympathy. "That type of suitcase is made of a special material that becomes buoyant when submerged. Unless the killer made sure to weigh it down sufficiently, it would float and drift with the current." "What now?" Jessica's voice trembled as she looked at the officers, confusion etched on her face. "We'll process all the evidence," Davis explained, his tone professionally calm. "The suitcase itself is an older model. It has some distinguishing features. Not many people use them anymore. We'll find out where it was sold and try to track down the buyer. The same goes for the Zippo lighter." The sheriff pointed to a faint price tag mark on the bottom of the lighter. "There's a store logo left here. It's not a major chain, but it could be a lead." Jessica peered at the sticker, her heart skipping a beat. "That design, it looks familiar, but I can't quite place it. Can I take some pictures?" she asked, already reaching for her phone, her fingers trembling nervously. "Of course," the sheriff nodded. "We'll also send you digital copies of all the photos and evidence reports." While Jessica took pictures, Davis continued discussing the case with the local authorities. "Given these findings, we're officially reclassifying the missing person case as a homicide investigation," he stated, his voice firm. "We'll need to contact the cruise line again, review the surveillance footage, and re-interview key personnel who were working that day. We'll also need to match the ship's route with the ocean currents to determine the possible drop location of the suitcase." The sheriff nodded, his face etched with empathy. "Our forensics team will finish analyzing the remains and all the items found in the suitcase. We've already started DNA testing." Mrs. Miller turned to Jessica, his gaze warm and understanding. "We'd like you to stay in the area for a few days. We'll need your additional testimony as the investigation progresses." Jessica wiped away a tear that trickled down her cheek and straightened her shoulders, her eyes filled with determination. "I understand. Before I go to where I'm staying, I'd like to visit the beach where the suitcase was found." Davis exchanged a look with the sheriff, doubt evident in his eyes. "Are you sure that's necessary?" he asked cautiously. "I need to see it," Jessica replied firmly, a steely edge in her voice. "I need to stand right there. I have to be strong to face this. If I ever find—" She trailed off, fighting back the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. After a brief pause, Davis nodded, making a decision. "All right, I'll go with you. I need to see it too. Green, can you take us?" "My boat's nearby, and some of our people are still on site," Green offered. Jessica nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I appreciate it very much." The drive to Oak Island took just under an hour. Jessica sat at the bow of the boat, feeling the salty spray on her face, as Samuel Green skillfully navigated the vessel through the choppy waters separating the barrier islands from the mainland. Detective Davis sat beside her, occasionally taking phone calls to update his department and casting worried glances at Jessica. "Right there," Green shouted over the engine noise, pointing to a stretch of coastline ahead. "That's where I found it." As they approached, Jessica saw a small crowd gathered on the beach. Yellow police tape cordoned off a section of sand, and several uniformed officers methodically moved about the area, taking photographs and measurements. A news van was parked nearby, and a reporter with a cameraman respectfully kept their distance from the scene. Green expertly docked the boat at a small pier. Once the boat was securely tied, he helped Jessica and Detective Davis onto the weathered wooden planks. "This way," he said, leading them down the pier and onto the beach. The sand was cool beneath Jessica's feet as they approached the cordoned-off area. The officer lifted the tape to let them pass, nodding respectfully to Detective Davis. "Mrs. Miller," the officer said solemnly, "we are deeply sorry for your loss." Jessica nodded in response, her gaze fixed on the indentation in the sand where the suitcase had been found. Although the suitcase itself had been removed, investigators had preserved the spot for further evidence collection. "Right here," Green said, stopping at the edge of the depression. "Right here," Jessica's voice trembled, "is where I found it." She stared at the strip of beach where the sand still bore the imprint of the tide, trying to comprehend. This place, a silent witness, was where the waves had brought what remained of her daughter after 10 months of desperate searching. She knelt down, her fingers digging into the cool, damp sand, as if trying to grasp a fleeting memory. "There has to be more evidence," she whispered, sifting the grains through her trembling fingers. "Something else that could tell us where." Detective Davis, sensing her pain, crouched beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, a gesture of support laced with empathy. "The forensics team worked thoroughly, Jessica. This is an important lead after all these months. We'll find—" In the distance, near the edge of the police tape, a news reporter was bustling about, his gaze fixed on them. Davis, noticing this, frowned. "I'll deal with the press," he said, rising. "You take a break." While Davis went to manage the inevitable encounter with the reporters, Green remained with Jessica. A moment of silence, filled with sympathy, hung between them before Green broke it. "There's lodging nearby, a small cottage resort where you could stay tonight before heading back to the mainland tomorrow. The owner is right over there." He nodded toward a middle-aged man standing in the crowd of onlookers behind the police tape. Jessica wiped away tears, getting to her feet. "I think that would be good. I don't want to leave just yet." "I understand," Green replied softly. "When my son went missing in a boating accident 5 years ago, I couldn't leave the harbor for weeks. Sometimes you just need to be near the last place they were." Jessica looked at him, a sudden understanding in her eyes, a flicker of compassion. "Did you ever find him?" Green shook his head. "The sea keeps its secrets, but at least I know where to go when I want to talk to him." When Davis returned, Jessica told him of her decision to stay. He nodded, his face thoughtful. "That's fine, but I'll assign an officer to stay with you for protection. Until we know more about what happened to your daughter, we need to be careful. He motioned to a female officer assisting at the scene. Officer Thompson will escort you to the cottages and stay with you overnight, he said, his voice low but firm. Jessica thanked him, nodding in appreciation, then allowed Green to introduce her to the cottage owner. The good-natured man, John Smith, expressed his deepest condolences, his eyes filled with genuine sympathy. He assured her that the cottage was well appointed. It's off-season, Harrison explained as they walked away from the cluster of buildings. Situated right on the beach. You'll have complete privacy. The cottage they approached was simple but impeccably clean. A single room with a double bed, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom. A covered porch faced directly onto the ocean, with 2 Adirondack chairs inviting one to enjoy the view of the endless waves. Once inside, Jessica felt an overwhelming need to step onto the porch. She needed the space, a breath of fresh air, to process the overwhelming emotions. Officer Thompson, understanding her state, took up a position nearby, maintaining vigilance while allowing Jessica the space she needed. A young waitress, a sympathetic smile on her face, brought Jessica a mug of hot coffee. "A welcome drink from the establishment. I'm so sorry about your daughter," she said softly, placing the mug on a small table. Jessica nodded silently in thanks, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm mug. She sat in a chair, her gaze fixed on the ocean. The waves, crashing against the shore, continued their timeless dance, indifferent to human sorrow. The same ocean that had brought Maddie's body to this shore now stretched before her, majestic and unforgiving. As the sun began its slow descent into the horizon, Jessica noticed movement at the cottage across from hers. A man emerged, reflexively checking his pockets as if ensuring he had everything before heading out. He placed a bag on the small table by the door, carefully locked the door, and then headed toward the resort's main office. Jessica noticed he had left something on the table, something small, metallic, glinting in the fading sunlight. Curiosity piqued, she slowly approached the table and discovered a pack of cigarettes and a lighter. Holding the lighter in her hands, Jessica began to turn it over, examining it closely. On the bottom was a sticker with the logo of a store, which matched the partially preserved sticker on the lighter that had been seized as evidence. A chill ran down Jessica's spine, despite the warm evening air. Her heart began to beat faster, a premonition of something terrible growing with each passing second. Noticing that the man was still heading towards the registration desk, Jessica hurried to catch up with him, clutching the lighter in her hand. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sounding agitated. "You seem to have forgotten this." The man turned around in surprise, and a smile spread across his face when he saw the lighter and pack of cigarettes. "Thank you," he said. "I would have definitely missed that." As he took the lighter from her hand, Jessica pointed to the sticker, holding her breath. "If you don't mind me asking, where did you get this?" "I collect vintage lighters and have been looking for this particular model for a long time." "Oh, it's from a little newsstand in Smithfield," the man replied. "A small place, but they have all sorts of odds and ends." "Does it have a name?" Jessica asked, trying to sound casual, but her heart was pounding in her chest. "I think it's called Jacob Black's Corner News. An older guy runs the place, always has some kind of bargain." "Interesting. Are you from around there?" "No, but there's a similar store in Richmond, Virginia, where I live," Jessica replied, her voice wavering slightly. "Maybe it's the same chain." Before the man could answer, an employee approached them with a square suitcase, absolutely identical to the one in which Maddie's remains had been found. Jessica's eyes widened in horror. "Sir, are you sure you want to leave this behind?" the employee asked. "We found it in your cottage." Jessica's gaze was fixated on the suitcase, as if paralyzed. It was the same color, the same style, the same size as the one in which her daughter's remains had rested. "Where did you get that?" The question burst out of her before she could stop herself. The man chuckled, his lips twisting into a disdainful smirk. "Same place I got the lighter. The newsstand owner in Smithfield sold it to me for next to nothing when I bought the lighter. Used it once, and the handle already broke. Complete junk. Wasn't worth the money." "Unless—" Rachel swallowed, her throat dry with anxiety. "Would you mind giving it to me? I know it sounds strange." "Take it." The man waved his hand dismissively, as if shooing away a pesky fly. "Save me the trouble of getting rid of it." "Thank you," Rachel breathed, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "Could I get your name and contact information? I'd like to thank you properly." The man looked slightly embarrassed, but still provided his details. "John Smith. But I still don't understand why you're so interested in my old junk." Rachel took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'm here with the police, investigating the disappearance of my daughters. One of them was found in a suitcase exactly like this one." Smith's face contorted from genuine embarrassment to utter horror in an instant. "Oh, God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." He shook his head, as if unable to believe what was happening. "I hope they find whoever did this. If there's anything I can do—" "Thank you for the information about the newsstand," Rachel replied, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "It may be more helpful than you think." As Thornton, hurrying to catch the ferry, disappeared from sight, Rachel returned to her cabin, clutching the broken suitcase in her hands and a jumble of conflicting thoughts in her head. Officer Martinez watched her with quiet curiosity, but tactfully refrained from asking questions. Rachel placed the suitcase on the floor, and her fingers, trembling slightly, reached for the phone. She dialed Detective Davis's number. "I haven't left yet," he answered as soon as Rachel got through. "What's wrong?" Rachel hurriedly told him about the lighter found in the tourist's suitcase and its connection to the newsstand in Smithfield. "That needs to be looked at immediately," Davis responded, his voice becoming hard and focused. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." 15 minutes later, Rachel stood on the shore next to Officer Martinez, anxiously awaiting Davis's arrival at the resort. The detective seemed to be engaged in a lively conversation with Samuel Green, who apparently had joined him after their previous departure. As they approached, Rachel noticed a news van pulling away. The reporter had apparently finished his work for the day. "Show me what you found," Davis demanded without preamble, his eyes gleaming with determination. Rachel led him to her cabin and pointed to the suitcase, describing the lighter with the price tag in detail. The tourist, John Smith, had said that he had purchased both items at a newsstand in Smithfield known as Jacob Black's Corner News. Davis's expression sharpened instantly. "Black? That's interesting." He grabbed his radio and quickly contacted the station. "I need all available information on a business called Jacob Black's Corner News in Smithfield." The owner's name, address, business history, everything. While they waited for a response, Rachel recounted John Smith's description of the kiosk owner, an older man who, according to him, was always up to something. "If the suitcase is indeed the one Maddie was found in," Rachel's voice trembled, "and the lighter has the same store sticker as the one with her initials, K.E., it can't be a mere coincidence." Davis, carefully examining the suitcase, nodded in agreement. "This could be the lead we've been searching for." The long-awaited sound came over the radio. A response. "Detective Davis, we have something for you. Jacob Black's Corner News is owned by Jacob Black, a 57-year-old male. He has 3 locations. The main one is in Smithfield, one in Richmond, and a new branch is opening in Virginia Beach next month. Sending you the Smithfield address and Black's home address." Davis instantly checked his phone as the message arrived. "It's getting late, but we still have some daylight left. Let's check out this kiosk," he said decisively. He and Officers Thompson and Green boarded the police boat. Green offered to take them back to the mainland. The return trip flew by. Every moment was precious as the sun rapidly descended towards the horizon. Once ashore, Davis requested a police car, and they headed to the provided address, Jacob Black's Corner News. The kiosk was a small, standalone building in a shopping center parking lot, selling newspapers, magazines, lottery tickets, and various sundries. Behind the counter stood a thin man in his 30s, neatly arranging cigarettes. He looked up as the detectives entered, his face devoid of emotion. "Can I help you?" he asked, leisurely adjusting the merchandise. "We're closing soon." Davis presented his badge. "Detective Davis, Virginia State Police. Are you the owner of this establishment?" The man shook his head. "No, sir. I just work here. Mr. Black is the owner. Is he here?" "No, he rarely comes here. He usually travels between the branches, checking in, I guess, about once a week at each." "Do you have his contact information?" The clerk hesitated slightly. "I think so." He rummaged under the counter and produced a business card with a phone number and address. "Do you sell Zippo lighters here?" Rachel asked, stepping forward. The clerk nodded and pointed to a small display case by the register. "Right here. We have a few different models." Rachel and Davis approached the display case, carefully examining the lighters. They were identical to the one found with Maddie, only with different designs, and without initials. Davis pulled out his phone and showed the clerk a photo of the evidence lighter. "Have you ever seen a lighter like this?" Rachel pointed to the photo. It prominently displayed the initials KE. The clerk narrowed his eyes, peering at the image. "We sell those in bulk, often get them engraved, but yeah, looks like ours. Same brand, same model." "What about suitcases?" Rachel continued, not taking her eyes off the clerk. "Do you sell suitcases?" The clerk looked visibly confused. "No, ma'am. We're a newsstand, not a luggage store." Rachel and Davis exchanged glances. The tourist claimed he had purchased the suitcase here. The clerk shrugged, spreading his hands. "Maybe Mr. Black sold him something from his personal belongings. He sometimes brings in odds and ends to sell. I don't get involved." "Thank you for your help," Davis said, taking the business card. "If Mr. Black shows up, please don't mention our visit. It's crucial to the investigation." Leaving the kiosk, Rachel suggested, "Maybe we should go to Black's address. There might be something suspicious there." Davis nodded, considering. "We could, but we don't have a search warrant. We need solid evidence." They slowly drove through the quiet residential neighborhood, lined with modest single-story houses with manicured lawns. Approaching Jacob Black's house, they slowed down, observing the house from across the street. The house was unremarkable. A pale yellow bungalow with white trim and a neatly trimmed lawn. A car was parked in the driveway. Its license plate was partially visible. "Look!" Rachel suddenly exclaimed, pointing to the license plate. "The first letters are JB, and the last ones are KE." Davis frowned, his gaze intensifying. "That's interesting, but let's not jump to conclusions. JB could stand for Jacob Black, but KE could just be a coincidence." They sat watching the house for several minutes, but there was no movement or sign of life inside. "I think it's time for us to return to the station," Davis finally decided. "We need to coordinate with the local police and develop a strategy. If Black is involved in your daughter's disappearance, we need to proceed cautiously." Rachel nodded, dejected. "I'm completely exhausted. Could you drop me off at Oak Island?" Davis's voice on the radio crackled with tension, the words flying out in staccato bursts. "Reserve. Units, immediately. Suspects, foot pursuit, Oak Island Ferry Terminal. Kidnapping. Man, woman, girl, approximately 8 years old. Perimeter and immediate backup required." He glanced at Jessica, his face etched with determination and concern. "Stay with Officer Thompson. Your safety is paramount." Before Jessica could protest, Davis was already sprinting toward the suspects, his gun drawn but held low. "Police, freeze!" he yelled, his voice cutting through the air. The man turned, saw Davis, and abruptly quickened his pace, shouting something to the woman, but Jessica couldn't make out the words. In an instant, the ferry terminal transformed into a scene of chaos. Sirens wailed, police cruisers blocked all exits, and officers surged forward in pursuit. Passengers awaiting boarding were quickly evacuated to secure areas, and loading operations were suspended. Jessica, watching the unfolding events with Officer Thompson, saw the trap closing around the suspects. The man, attempting to scale a fence, was tackled by 2 officers. The woman, still clutching the child's hand, darted between parked cars, only to be quickly surrounded by officers with weapons drawn. "Release the child!" a voice boomed. The woman froze, and then her fingers loosened. The girl, now free, looked around in a panic until her gaze locked onto Jessica. Even from a distance, there was no mistaking the flash of recognition, the silent cry of the soul. "Mommy!" the girl shrieked. "Mommy!" Jessica, as if released from a cage, broke free from her daze and ran toward her daughter. Meeting halfway, she dropped to her knees, wrapping Emily in her arms, her sobs a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Emily! Oh my God!" she cried, feeling the tremble in her daughter's small body. Emily clung to her mother, her words muffled by tears, lost in Jessica's shoulder. Davis approached them, his face reflecting a blend of relief and professional concern. He witnessed the collapse of a wall of fear, the reconnection of a bond that seemed lost forever. "They're both in custody," he said quietly. "Jessica, we need to get you and Emily to safety while we process the suspects." Jessica nodded, clutching her daughter as if afraid to let go. "Who are they?" Her voice strained with emotion. "According to their IDs, Jacob Black and Sarah Johnson," Davis replied. "Husband and wife." Jessica's eyes widened in horror. "Katie Evans, the initials on the lighter." Davis nodded, his expression grim. "We've impounded their vehicle and are obtaining a search warrant. A preliminary sweep revealed several suitcases in the trunk and disturbing items in the back seat." Jessica looked down at Emily, truly assessing her condition for the first time since their reunion. The girl appeared frighteningly thin, her once fair skin now bearing an unnatural tan, as if artificially darkened. Her hair was cut shorter than Jessica had ever styled it, and her eyes held a weariness completely foreign to an 8-year-old. "She needs medical attention," Jessica whispered, barely holding back her tears. "An ambulance is on its way," Davis reassured her. Moments later, paramedics arrived. They gently examined Emily, who clung tightly to her mother's hand, refusing to let go. The girl flinched at the bright light of the penlight the paramedic used to check her pupils, turning away and sobbing. "Please stop taking pictures," she mumbled. Jessica exchanged a worried glance with Davis, who immediately took note of her words. Just then, the officers searching the suspect's car emerged with grim expressions. One of them approached Davis, speaking in an almost hushed tone. "We found 2 boxes of obscene magazines in the trunk," the officer reported. "Child pornography and syringes filled with what appears to be a sedative in the back seat. It looks like they were planning to drug her before boarding the ferry." Davis's jaw tightened. "Get the crime scene unit down here immediately. Document everything." Jessica had heard enough to grasp the full horror of the situation. Her grief for Maddie turned into a white-hot fury as she watched Black and Johnson being placed in separate police cars. Pulling away from Emily for a moment, she approached Black just as he was being pushed into the vehicle. "You monster!" Jessica shouted, her eyes blazing with rage. "You weren't just transporting your sick magazines. You killed my daughter. You killed Maddie." Black's gaze, as he looked up, was chilling in its terrifying calm. "I didn't want to kill the other one," he said casually. "I wanted to keep both, but my accomplice objected. I couldn't handle 2 kids alone without getting caught. I had to choose." Jessica lunged at him, but Davis intercepted her, pulling her back. "Save it for the station, Black," he growled, glaring at the suspect. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." As the cars drove away, the paramedics approached them, bringing news about Emily. Emily was given a mild sedative, one of them reported. "There are signs of malnutrition and physical abuse. She needs to be rushed to the hospital for a full examination and treatment." Jessica nodded, rushing to her daughter. "I'll go with her," she said to Davis. "Of course," he agreed. "I'll come to the hospital as soon as we're done with the suspects. This is just the beginning, Jessica. We'll need your statement once Emily is stable." Jessica got into the ambulance next to her daughter, clutching her frail hand as the sirens wailed, cutting through the air. Despite all the horror of what had happened and the grief over Maddie's confirmed death, a fierce gratitude flared in Jessica's chest that at least one of her daughters had been found alive. "It's over, Emily," she whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. "You're safe. They can't hurt you anymore." The bright lights of the hospital hallway stung Jessica's eyes as she paced nervously outside the emergency room door. Officer Thompson remained nearby, watching both Jessica and the entrance carefully. A nurse gently but firmly asked Jessica to wait outside while the doctors examined Emily. Though it pained her to be separated from her daughter so soon after her rescue, Jessica understood that they needed space to work. "Mrs. Miller?" The nurse, who appeared in the doorway, nodded. "You can come in now." Jessica, gripped by anxiety, hurried into the room. Emily seemed even smaller, a fragile doll lost in the folds of white sheets. An IV dripped clear life into her arm, and a doctor, leaning over a chart, made notes. "Mom," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible, reaching out a thin hand to Jessica. Jessica took it carefully, trying not to disturb the IV. The warmth of her hand seemed to be the only anchor in this storm. "I'm here, sweetie. I'm not going anywhere." Dr. Lee, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes but a stern expression, approached them. "Mrs. Miller, I'm Dr. Lee. I've finished examining Emily." Jessica pressed her lips together, a plea in her voice. "How is she?" Dr. Lee's expression remained grave. "Emily is malnourished. She's significantly underweight for her age. There are numerous bruises on her body, on her back and legs, consistent with physical punishment, likely from a thin, flexible object, like a rattan cane or a belt." Jessica flinched, barely containing her anger, and gently squeezed Emily's hand, trying to convey her support. "There are also marks on her wrists and ankles," Dr. Lee continued, suggesting she was restrained for extended periods, possibly with chains or zip ties. Dr. Lee lowered her voice, though Emily seemed to be half asleep from the medication. "She's very sensitive to bright lights and camera flashes, which is consistent with frequent photographing. Based on her reactions during the examination and some things she's said, I'm concerned she may have been used as a model for indecent material." Jessica closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back tears, ready to explode with pain and rage. "What's the treatment plan?" she managed to ask, trying to remain calm. "We'll start by addressing the malnutrition, carefully monitoring her nutrition. The sedatives will wear off within 24 hours. Physically, she should recover fairly quickly with proper care. But the psychological trauma—" Dr. Lee's voice trailed off. "She'll need specialized therapy, Mrs. Miller. This experience has left indelible marks, deep scars on her soul." Jessica nodded, a steely resolve in her eyes. "She'll get everything she needs, whatever it takes," she said firmly. Dr. Lee squeezed her shoulder reassuringly, trying to ease the pain, if only a little. "She's a strong girl. She'll get through this. Your presence here is key to her recovery." As the doctor left, Jessica pulled a chair close to Emily's bed, as if afraid to miss a moment. She gently took her daughter's hand, squeezing it in hers, trying to convey all her love and protection. Emily drifted in and out of sleep, muttering incoherently, words that Jessica desperately tried to catch. The hours dragged on. Nurses, like silent guardians, came and went, checking vital signs, adjusting IVs. Darkness fell outside the window as Detective Davis appeared in the doorway. His gaze, full of sympathy, immediately went to the sleeping Emily. "How is she?" he asked quietly, trying not to disturb the fragile balance of silence. Jessica gestured for him to step into the hallway, away from the room. "Physically, she'll pull through," Jessica replied softly as soon as they were in the corridor. Her voice trembled with suppressed emotion. "But emotionally, it's going to be a long road." Davis nodded grimly, his face etched with sympathy and weariness. "I have news from the interrogation. Black is clamming up, but Johnson is cooperating. She wants a deal." "And what did she say?" Jessica's voice barely escaped her lips. "A lot." Davis rubbed his tired eyes as if trying to erase what he had seen. Black and Johnson weren't acting alone. They were part of a larger network that produced and distributed illegal materials involving children. Black provided the children, and others handled the production. A wave of nausea washed over Jessica, and despair gripped her throat. "How many children are we talking about?" "Based on Johnson's testimony, we believe there are at least 10 other children currently being held. Black-owned property, under another name. Our teams are working on the location now." Jessica's heart clenched with fear. "What about my daughters? How did he get to them on the cruise ship?" Davis took a deep breath, bracing himself to share another layer of the nightmare. According to Johnson, Black boarded the cruise ship under a false name, using a prepaid card and a disposable email. He disguised himself as a member of the ship's crew by stealing a uniform from a storage room early in the voyage. He also used a small electronic device to temporarily disable the security camera near where he took the girls. Jessica leaned against the wall, trying to process the horror. How could this even be possible? "But how did he get them to go with him? My girls know not to go with strangers." Her voice broke, tears welling up in her eyes. Johnson, in slow motion, recalled the events of that fateful day. He had seen them before on that very cruise liner. He watched them, mesmerized, watching a magic show, and that information became the key to his diabolical plan. When he approached them, he demonstrated a card trick he had seen the ship's magician perform. Simple, but effective. He gained their trust like a seasoned hunter luring prey into a trap. Jessica closed her eyes, her imagination painting a terrifying picture. Her daughters, trusting and naive, following this man, captivated by his tricks. And Maddie, what about her? Davis's voice faltered, his face shadowed with grief. Johnson hadn't witnessed that moment, but Black had shared the details with him later. Initially, Black had planned to take both girls, but his then accomplice, not Johnson, had balked at the idea, realizing they were twins. Keeping 2 children seemed too risky, too complicated. Davis paused, preparing to deliver the most terrible words. Black strangled Maddie. No struggle, no screams, no blood, just ruthless silence. He wrapped her in her own clothes, stuffed her into a suitcase, and tossed her overboard that night from an inconspicuous deck where trash was usually dumped. Jessica gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, stifling the sobs threatening to erupt. And Andy? How did he get her off the ship? Davis continued, his voice trembling. He hid Andy in the bathroom of his cabin until morning, when the ship docked in Key West. He drugged her to keep her compliant but conscious, and threatened her using Maddie's death. When they disembarked, Black used a disguise. Sunglasses, a fake beard, different clothes. He melted into the morning bustle among families with children, trying to go unnoticed. Black prepared fake documents, and they transported her to various locations, from Key West through Florida and finally to North Carolina, trying to avoid detection. Davis continued, his voice full of bitterness. Jessica shook her head, unable to believe what she was hearing. We were in Virginia before the cruise. He was watching us before that? Johnson confirmed that Black traveled frequently and had mentioned seeing beautiful twin girls in Virginia. It would be perfect for their next story. We believe he may have spotted you and your daughters before the cruise and planned this all in advance. A shiver ran down Jessica's spine. The lighter with the engraved K. Was it a clue, or just a coincidence? Johnson claimed it was her personal item, accidentally ending up in Maddie's bag when Black was hastily disposing of evidence. She had been looking for it for months. Jessica glanced at the ward where Emily was sleeping peacefully. We have to make sure they never get out. And all those magazines, they have to be destroyed. These children don't deserve to have their suffering replicated forever. Davis nodded, his gaze filled with determination. We're working with federal authorities. This is no longer just one case. I promise Black and Johnson will answer for everything they've done to your family. He put his hand on her shoulder, expressing support. You need to rest. You'll need all your strength when she wakes up. Jessica nodded, fatigue finally washing over her in waves. Thank you, Detective, for everything. As Davis left, Jessica returned to the bed, settling into the uncomfortable hospital chair, anticipating a long night. Despite all the horror she had experienced, a grim satisfaction settled in her soul that the perpetrators had been caught, and a faint hope that her surviving daughter was finally safe. The early morning light streamed into the room, filtering through the thin hospital curtains. Jessica woke up, her neck aching from the awkward position she'd been in. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then, like a tsunami, the events of the previous day crashed over her. She sat up abruptly, glancing at her daughter. Emily was still asleep, her face looking slightly less pale than it had the night before. The IV drip had been replaced, and an untouched tray of bland hospital breakfast sat on the bedside table. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. A nurse entered, followed by Dr. Lee. "Good morning, doctor," Jessica said quietly. "How did she sleep?" "Restlessly," Jessica replied. "She was having nightmares, talking in her sleep." Dr. Lee nodded, studying the chart. "That's to be expected. The sedatives we gave her are wearing off. We'd like to run a few more tests today, if that's all right with you." "Of course," Jessica agreed quickly, willing to do anything. As Dr. Lee continued her examination, Officer Thompson appeared in the doorway, looking as though she, too, had spent a sleepless night in an uncomfortable chair. "Mrs. Miller," Thompson began, "Detective Davis called. He's on his way over with an update." Jessica nodded gratefully, feeling a surge of relief. "Thank you for staying the night." Thompson gave a tired smile, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Just doing my job, ma'am. Though I must say, in all my years on the force, I've never seen a case quite this horrific. You're lucky to have found your daughter alive after all this time." Jessica's gaze drifted back to her sleeping daughter. "If I were lucky, I wouldn't have lost either of my daughters in the first place." The bitter thought flashed through her mind. Thompson's expression softened, as if she had heard the unspoken words. "I'm sorry. That was insensitive of me." "No," Jessica sighed, fighting back tears. "In some ways you're right. So many parents never get closure, never find their missing children. At least I have Emily back, and I know what happened to Maddie." Jessica's voice cracked. "It's a bittersweet kind of luck, but it's something." Dr. Lee finished her examination and turned to Jessica, her eyes full of compassion. "Emily's vitals are improving. The tests show the sedatives are wearing off, but she's still severely malnourished. We'll start her on a carefully monitored diet today." "When can I take her home?" Jessica asked, a flicker of hope in her voice. "Not for several days yet," Dr. Lee replied. "We need to stabilize her physically and begin a psychological evaluation before she's discharged, and even then, she'll need ongoing care." Jessica nodded, knowing they had a long road ahead. About an hour later, Emily began to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding her gaze for a moment before she focused on Jessica. "Mommy," Emily whispered, as if afraid it were just a dream. "I'm here, sweetheart," Jessica said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You're safe now." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Maddie? Where's Maddie?" Jessica swallowed hard, unsure how to explain to her 8-year-old daughter that her twin sister was dead. Before she could answer, Detective Davis appeared in the doorway. His face was etched with a mixture of triumph and grim satisfaction. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Jessica nodded gratefully, welcoming the reprieve from the agonizing question. Davis entered, removing his hat respectfully. "Good morning, Jessica." His voice was gentle and reassuring. "I'm Detective Davis. I helped your mom look for you." Emily looked at him warily, instinctively reaching for her mother. "It's okay," her mother whispered quietly, holding her close. "Detective Davis is one of the good guys." Davis kept a respectful distance, his words measured and careful. "I thought you'd want to know. This morning, we raided another property belonging to Jacob Black, on Coral Island. It's where he was planning to take you yesterday, according to information from the ferry terminal." Emily's eyes widened in horror. "We rescued 3 more children being held there." Jessica gasped, a wave of relief washing over her. "Are they okay?" "They're receiving medical attention now," Davis replied. "Some of them have been missing for over a year. We're working to identify them and contact their families." A fierce wave of satisfaction surged through Jessica. "What about Black and Johnson? Are they talking?" "Johnson has given a full confession in exchange for a plea deal," Davis confirmed. "She said she couldn't live with the guilt anymore. She always knew it was wrong, even though she coordinated everything here for her husband." Jessica's fists clenched. Black is still not cooperating, but with Johnson's testimony and the evidence we've gathered, he's now facing multiple life sentences. "Good," Jessica said firmly, her voice trembling with anger. "I hope they rot in jail for a very long time." Even for his wife. "She still helped keep my daughter captive for months. She still participated." She couldn't finish the sentence, her throat seized with a spasm. "She will be facing serious charges," Davis assured her. "Cooperation may mitigate the sentence, but she won't be walking free." Jessica glanced at her mother through the doorway. "What happens now?" "We'll need your official statement and eventually your testimony when you're ready. But there's no rush. Your recovery comes first." Jessica nodded gratefully, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Detective, for everything." Davis offered a genuine smile. "I'm just glad we found her. In all my years, cases like this rarely end with the child coming home alive." His words were a balm, a sliver of hope piercing through the darkness. As Davis left the room, Jessica returned to the bedside, her heart heavy with trepidation. Rowley, as if sensing her approach, stirred awake. The girl's eyes, wide with fear, locked on too. Her mother, as if afraid of another separation. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Maddie's gone, isn't she? For good?" Jessica took a deep breath, stifling the rising tide of tears, and sat beside her daughter, gently taking her small hand in her own. "Yes, honey. Maddie's gone. A bad man hurt her very badly." Tears streamed down Raleigh's face, confirming her worst fears. "I knew it. He told me she was gone, but I didn't want to believe it. I kept hoping she was somewhere, like me, that you'd find us both. I wish I—" Jessica's voice cracked, and tears now flowed freely down her cheeks. "I looked for you both every day, never gave up. I was so scared." Rowley, sobbing, continued. "After they took us, and Maddie was gone, they kept moving me around, changing how I looked, making me stand still for pictures. If I cried, they hit me. Said if I tried to run or tell anyone, they'd hurt you." Jessica, overwhelmed with compassion, gently pulled her daughter close, mindful of the IV line, and embraced her. "You were so brave, my darling girl. So brave. And you don't have to be afraid anymore. Those people are going to prison for a very, very long time. They will never be able to hurt you or anyone else again." For a long time, mother and daughter held each other in silence, sharing the grief of Maddie's loss and the relief of their reunion. Eventually, the medication began to lull Raleigh back to sleep, and she drifted off, nestled against her mother. As Jessica gently laid her daughter back on the pillow, her gaze fell on something she hadn't noticed before. A small scar at the hairline, likely from one of the countless abuses she had endured over the past 10 months. It was a stark reminder of everything that had been stolen from her daughter: her innocence, her sense of security, her twin sister. But as she looked at the sleeping face, Jessica saw something else. Strength. The same determined spirit that had helped Raleigh survive this nightmare. And in that moment, in that quiet room, Jessica felt a surge of hope. There would be a long and arduous road to recovery, fraught with therapy sessions, night terrors, and agonizing memories. There would be Maddie's funeral, days where grief would sear their souls like a branding iron. But now, for the first time in 10 long months, a fragile hope flickered within Jessica. They would build a new life, filled with love and memories of Maddie, a life that would allow them to heal and bloom again. She brushed a stray strand of hair from her daughter's forehead and whispered, her voice trembling with emotion and conviction, "We're going to be okay. No matter how hard it gets, someday we will be happy again." Outside the window, the morning sun spilled across the horizon like a river of gold. Its rays, like an invisible brush, painted long shadows on the ground, which slowly faded with the arrival of the new day. This dance of light and darkness seemed to whisper, even after the darkest night, dawn always arrives. And this promise, this premonition of a new day, filled Jessica